I've never been the type of person who likes to stand out. You know the ones, those girls who always seem to glide through life effortlessly, the ones who turn heads without even trying. I've always been on the other side of the room, quietly observing. I'm Maya Patel, a name most people forget by the end of the day, just another face in the crowd. And that's exactly how I've always felt, like a backdrop to everyone else's story. I wouldn't say I was ugly, not exactly. But I didn't stand out, and that's something I had come to accept. My hair was the kind that never quite looked right no matter how I styled it, flat, frizzy, always in the way. My clothes were mostly comfortable, never trendy, and certainly never eye-catching. And my face, well, it was ordinary. No sharp cheekbones, no perfect smile. Just me. Plain Maya. School was tough, but not in the way you'd imagine. I wasn't bullied or anything like that, but I wasn't part of the in-crowd either. I wasn't one of the girls who was invited to parties or asked out by guys. Instead, I was the girl who kept to herself, found solace in her books, and spent more time daydreaming about a life she didn't seem to be able to reach. There were moments when I'd scroll through Instagram, endlessly comparing myself to the seemingly perfect lives of my classmates. They had the looks, the friends, the boyfriends. They were everything I wasn't. It wasn't just about looks, though. I realized, as I sat alone in my room late one night, that there was something deeper at play. I wasn't unhappy because of how I looked. I was unhappy because I felt invisible. I had this deep yearning to be seen, to feel valued, not for what I could do for others, but for who I truly was. A part of me longed to be noticed, not just by my friends or teachers, but by the world around me. I wanted to be more than just a shadow. I wanted to matter. There was a flicker deep within me, though, that I couldn't quite place. It was a yearning to break free from the confines I had built for myself. There was potential, hidden somewhere inside, a side of me that I knew existed but was afraid to embrace. I had always convinced myself that I wasn't the type of person who could ever be the center of attention, but deep down I wondered, what if I could be? What if there was more to me than I had ever allowed myself to believe? Little did I know, one small moment, one class project, would lead me down a path that would force me to confront my deepest fears and desires, to discover the strength and beauty I never knew I had. It all started in Ms. Monroe's sophomore English class. We were all sitting in our usual seats, the hum of whispered conversations filling the air as we waited for the lesson to begin. But today, something was different. Ms. Monroe walked in with a rare look of excitement on her face, holding a stack of papers. "All right, class, listen up," she announced, her voice cutting through the chatter. "This semester, we're doing something a little different. Instead of the usual research paper, I'm assigning you a group project. But not just any project, a presentation where you'll need to showcase a skill or talent. It's your time to shine." The words, showcase a skill or talent, echoed in my mind as I froze in place. It felt like the room shrank around me, and I could feel the pressure building up in my chest. For me, showcasing anything felt terrifying. I wasn't like those girls in school who could easily talk about their achievements or talents. I had nothing extraordinary to offer. "Everyone will be grouped randomly," Ms. Monroe continued, flipping through the papers. "And the project will count for a significant portion of your grade. So, no pressure." She chuckled, but I could tell from the way her eyes scanned the room that it wasn't entirely a joke. I heard my name called, along with 3 others. Emily, Kate, and my stomach sank, Tyler. Tyler Collins. The guy who seemed to have everything. Charm, popularity, the looks, the confidence. He was one of those kids who could walk into a room and make everyone laugh, everyone like him. And me? I was the complete opposite. The idea of working with him, of being judged by him, made my insides twist. When our eyes met across the room, Tyler flashed me a grin. "Well, this should be fun," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The whole class laughed, and my cheeks burned. I wished I could disappear right then and there. As we gathered to discuss the project, my mind raced. What could I possibly contribute? How could I show something worthy when all I could see in myself was just plain Maya? But something about the way Tyler looked at me, the way his challenge felt like a dare, sparked something inside. It was as if his casual comment had ignited a fire. Maybe this was my chance, not just to survive high school, but to finally be seen. And so, the project began. What I didn't know was that this project would push me further than I could have ever imagined, testing my limits, my fears, and my very idea of who I was. As the days passed after the project assignment, I found myself dreading every group meeting. At first, the task was straightforward enough. We needed to come up with a concept that would wow the class. But the moment I stepped into that first meeting with Tyler, Emily, and Kate, I felt small. I was the last person anyone would expect to be a leader in a project like this. Tyler, naturally, took charge right away. "We should do something fun, something people will remember," he suggested, leaning back in his chair, a cocky smile playing at the corners of his lips. "How about a fashion show? We could each pick a theme and model it." The girls, as expected, nodded eagerly. Kate was already sketching designs in her notebook, and Emily seemed too busy to notice anything else. They were already confident in their abilities, while I felt like I was just tagging along. I didn't have a fashion sense. I didn't have the presence to pull off a fashion show. I was terrified. I couldn't stop thinking about how unqualified I felt for this. Every idea I tossed out seemed absurd. "Maybe we could do something with photography?" I suggested weakly, but my voice barely made it past my lips. Kate shot me a look, but didn't say anything. Tyler, of course, wasn't interested. "No one's going to remember a photography project, Maya," he said dismissively. His words stung, more than I wanted to admit. I could feel my heart sinking as the group naturally gravitated away from anything I had to offer. I was ready to back out, to fade into the background, and let them take control. But something in me stopped. Maybe it was the sting of Tyler's words. Maybe it was the thought of letting this opportunity slip away. I had never really tried, not really tried, to stand out. To be seen for something other than just the quiet, bookish girl. What would happen if I pushed myself just a little further? What would happen if I actually allowed myself to be something else for once? I decided I would take a risk, but I didn't know where to start. One afternoon after school, I sat at the edge of the bleachers, picking at the strings of my hoodie. It was chilly, but I was too wrapped up in my thoughts to notice the cold. That's when Emily came over, holding a warm drink in one hand. "Hey," she said, sitting down beside me. "You've been quiet lately." I turned to her, unsure how to answer. I felt like I had nothing interesting to say. But Emily wasn't going to let me off the hook that easily. "You know, you don't have to be perfect to contribute," she said with a smile. "I've noticed you're good at organizing things. Maybe you could help us out with the presentation aspect of the project? We need someone who can hold everything together, keep us on track." Her words took me by surprise. I had always considered myself too awkward and shy to be good at anything that required real leadership. But hearing her speak so confidently about me sparked something inside. Could I really be good at something like that? "I'm not sure I'm the best choice," I said hesitantly. "I don't really stand out like you, or Tyler." Emily laughed, her eyes softening. "You don't have to. Sometimes the best leaders are the ones who don't scream for attention. It's about being reliable, about helping others shine. And I think you could do that." For the first time, I realized Emily wasn't just being polite. She believed in me, and in that moment, something clicked. It was as though the permission I had been waiting for came not from Tyler, not from anyone else, but from myself. I didn't have to be the loudest person in the room, or the one who got all the attention. I just had to find a way to contribute. I could help in the background, organize, coordinate, and bring the project to life in my own way. It might not be glamorous, but it was still valuable. I began to take small steps forward. I started to research different presentation styles, watching YouTube tutorials about public speaking, and reading articles on how to captivate an audience. I worked on my confidence, even practicing in front of the mirror. Each day, I pushed myself a little more, making eye contact, speaking up more in group meetings, suggesting ideas that felt more daring. One day, I walked into the next group meeting, and as I looked at the other three, I felt a shift. Tyler was rambling on about another flashy idea, but this time, I interrupted him. "What if," I started, my voice trembling a bit, "we turn this into something more interactive? Something that's not just a show, but an experience. The room went silent. Kate and Emily looked at each other, and then back at me, their eyes wide. Even Tyler stopped talking for a second. "You're right," Emily said after a beat, her tone thoughtful. "An experience? I like that." We began to mold the idea around my suggestion. The project started taking shape. It wouldn't be a traditional fashion show or a boring presentation. We would create a dynamic experience for the class, incorporating interactive elements, multimedia, and storytelling. And the best part was, I could contribute in ways I hadn't imagined. Every day after that, I felt more and more like the person I had been too afraid to be. I wasn't just a passive observer in the background anymore. I was actively shaping our project, taking ownership of the parts that scared me the most. And each small success, each new idea that came to life, each moment when my confidence grew just a little, felt like an accomplishment. For the first time in a long time, I saw myself differently. Maybe I wasn't the prettiest girl, or the most outgoing, or the most confident. But I had something valuable to offer, something that was uniquely mine. And I wasn't afraid to let it shine. The closer we got to the presentation day, the more I felt my insecurities creeping back in. The enthusiasm I'd gained during the initial stages of the project began to fade as the stakes got higher. I could see it in the eyes of my classmates as they whispered behind my back, judging the quiet girl who had suddenly begun taking the lead. I wasn't naive, I knew what they thought of me. I was the one who hid in the corners of the classroom, always trying to avoid attention. And now, all of a sudden, I was standing at the front, making decisions, suggesting ideas. I could feel the weight of their scrutiny bearing down on me, making it harder to breathe. The first real challenge came during our final rehearsal a few days before the presentation. The tension in the room was thick, and I could see the stress on the faces of my teammates, especially Tyler. He wasn't happy that my ideas had taken center stage. He kept trying to push his own flashy ideas, one after another, but I stood my ground, even if it felt like I was walking on eggshells. He glared at me from across the room, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "We don't need all these interactive elements," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "The class is here to watch a show, not be part of it. You're overcomplicating things." My heart sank, and for a brief moment, I doubted everything I had worked for. Was he right? Was I trying to be something I wasn't? Was I truly the one making the project worse? I took a deep breath and met his gaze, forcing myself to speak, though my voice was shaky. "I think the interactive experience will make it more memorable. People remember experiences, not just things they see." I looked to Emily and Kate for support, but Tyler's frustration was palpable. He didn't want to let go of the vision he had for the project, even if it meant ignoring what was best for the group. "You're not listening," he spat, his words hitting harder than I expected. "You don't get it, Maya. You're out of your depth. You're trying to be something you're not." The sting of his words was enough to make my breath catch in my throat. I had spent so long hiding in the background, trying not to be noticed, and now that I was finally trying to step up, I was met with criticism that made me feel small again. My heart raced, and my hands trembled. I turned away, needing a moment to regain control, but I couldn't shake the doubt that lingered in my chest. Was I really cut out for this? Maybe I should have kept my head down and let Tyler lead. He was confident, assertive, everything I wasn't. Maybe this project wasn't for me at all. I spent the next few hours lost in my thoughts. I sat alone in the school courtyard, pulling my knees to my chest, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Every step I had taken toward believing in myself now seemed foolish. I wasn't meant to lead. I wasn't meant to be the face of anything. But then, a voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. "Maya?" I looked up, surprised to see Emily standing there, her expression soft and understanding. "I saw what happened," she said quietly, sitting down next to me. "Don't let Tyler get to you. You've come so far with this project, and it's better because of your ideas. You believe in it, and that's what matters." I didn't say anything, but I nodded slowly. Emily's words were the lifeline I needed. She was right. I wasn't going to let Tyler or anyone else define me. I couldn't turn back now. Later that day, I returned to the group, my resolve stronger. Tyler had calmed down, and I could tell that the others were still unsure. But I wasn't backing down. I knew we had a good idea, and I wasn't about to let anyone tear it apart. I spoke up, my voice steady but firm. I think we need to stick with the interactive experience. It's different, and it's memorable. Let's make this something that people talk about. To my surprise, Emily and Kate both nodded in agreement, and Tyler didn't argue this time. Maybe he realized that I wasn't going to budge, or maybe he was tired of fighting. But for the first time, I felt like my voice mattered. The weight in my chest lifted, and I felt the confidence I had been searching for a turn. However, the hardest part still lay ahead, the presentation itself. As the day of the presentation neared, I couldn't help but feel the familiar unease settling in my stomach. The idea was finally solidified, and it was time for all of us to step up and execute it. But with the looming judgment of the class and Tyler's still resentful presence, I couldn't shake the fear that I wasn't enough. I wasn't the prettiest, the loudest, or the most outgoing. What if my insecurities held me back again? The night before the presentation, I stared at myself in the mirror, questioning everything. But as I took a deep breath and looked at the girl staring back at me, I realized something. I wasn't the same person I was a few weeks ago. I had taken the risk, I had spoken up, and I had fought for what I believed in. And no matter what happened the next day, I had already grown. That alone was enough to make me proud of myself. I was ready. The day of the presentation arrived, and with it came a wave of nerves that seemed to have settled deep within me, squeezing at my insides. But something was different. The weight of my self-doubt was lighter now, replaced by a quiet determination I hadn't recognized in myself before. As I stood in front of the mirror that morning, looking at my reflection, I didn't see the shy, insecure girl who had always kept herself small. I saw someone capable of more, someone who had fought against her own fears and hesitations. My hands were still trembling slightly, but the fear in my chest had shifted into a new kind of energy, one that was driving me forward instead of holding me back. I ran my fingers through my hair, pulling it back into a sleek ponytail, and for the first time in a long while, I felt confident in my appearance. The clothes I chose weren't anything extraordinary, a simple, well-fitted blouse and a pair of jeans. But as I looked at myself, I realized that it wasn't about the clothes or the makeup. It was about the person I had become in the process. Walking into the classroom, I could feel the eyes of my classmates on me, but this time, it wasn't the same. Instead of shrinking away, I stood tall, shoulders back, and walked with a purpose. The familiar feeling of anxiety was there, lingering at the edges, but I refused to let it define me anymore. I wasn't going to apologize for who I was or what I had accomplished. As our group took the stage, I found myself in the center of it all. The spotlight felt brighter than I expected, but rather than making me shrink back, it felt like a confirmation of my place. I began speaking, explaining the ideas that had been met with so much resistance in the beginning. My voice was steady, confident, and clear. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty in my words. I wasn't just presenting the project anymore. I was sharing a part of myself with the world, something I hadn't dared to do before. The transformation wasn't just in my words or actions. It was in the way I held myself. As I spoke, I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of my classmates. Tyler, who had been so dismissive of my ideas at first, stood in the back with a look of reluctant admiration. Emily and Kate smiled at me from the side, their faces beaming with pride. I could feel their support in the air, and it gave me the strength to push forward. But what struck me most was the way the other students looked at me. They were listening. They were engaged. It wasn't the same judgmental stares I had feared. They were paying attention to what I was saying, not how I looked or how quiet I used to be. I had their respect, not because of my appearance or what others thought I could do, but because I had shown up and proven that I was capable of so much more than I had ever believed. When the presentation ended, there was a moment of silence before the applause broke out. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was genuine. The applause was for me, for the girl who had dared to step into the light. And in that moment, I realized how far I had come. The transformation wasn't just about proving something to others, it was about finally seeing my own worth and embracing it. As I walked off the stage, Emily pulled me into a hug. "You did it," she whispered, her voice full of awe. I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. I did, I said, knowing deep down that this was just the beginning of something bigger. I had embraced who I truly was, and nothing could take that away from me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally enough. The day of the final showcase arrived, and I could barely breathe. The auditorium was packed, the air thick with anticipation. I stood backstage, the muffled sounds of chatter and laughter seeping through the heavy curtains. My palms were slick with sweat, and my heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't just a presentation. It was the culmination of everything I had been fighting for: my confidence, my self-worth, and my place in the world. It felt like every part of me was trembling on the edge of something huge. I had worked tirelessly for weeks, perfecting the project, rehearsing my speech, practicing every gesture. But none of that preparation could shake the deep-rooted fear gnawing at me. The fear that I would fail, that I wouldn't measure up, that I would crumble in front of everyone. Emily stood beside me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. "You've got this," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're ready?" I nodded, but her words couldn't stop the panic rising in my chest. What if this wasn't enough? What if I didn't belong here? I thought of all the people who had doubted me, the quiet whispers I had overheard, the judgments about how I wasn't pretty enough, confident enough, anything enough. The weight of those words pressed down on me like 1,000 pounds. But then I remembered something. I remembered the girl who had sat in the back of the classroom, head down, afraid to speak up. I remembered the nights spent practicing alone in my room, pushing through the doubts. I remembered the moment I had chosen to step into the spotlight, to shed the old version of myself. And I realized, the girl who had been afraid to speak, who had once believed she wasn't worthy of attention, wasn't the girl standing backstage anymore. The curtains opened, and the spotlight hit me like a wave of heat. I took one deep breath, steadying myself, before stepping forward into the light. The room was silent as I walked to the center of the stage, but instead of shrinking under the weight of their gaze, I stood tall. My feet felt rooted to the floor, my posture straight, my shoulders back. The fear that had once crippled me was still there, but this time, it didn't own me. I owned it. I began to speak, my voice clear and confident, cutting through the silence. The words came easily now, flowing with a newfound strength I hadn't known I had. As I spoke, I didn't just present the facts of the project. I told the story of how we had come together, how we had struggled, how we had pushed through every barrier, including the ones within ourselves. I spoke about the fear I had conquered, about the girl I had been, and the woman I had become. Halfway through, I paused, locking eyes with my classmates, my teachers, and most importantly, with myself. In that moment, I saw the transformation reflected in their faces. They weren't just seeing the girl who had walked in that morning, quiet and uncertain. They were seeing someone different. Someone strong. Someone real. And for the first time, I realized it wasn't about impressing them. It was about showing up for myself. As I finished, there was a silence that stretched on, thick with emotion. And then applause. Not just polite clapping, but a standing ovation. The sound of it thundered in my ears, but what I heard most clearly was the quiet satisfaction in my heart. I had done it. I had faced my fear, and in doing so, I had become the person I was always meant to be. As I stepped down from the stage, Emily was waiting for me, her face beaming. "That was amazing," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. But in that moment, I didn't need anyone else's approval. I knew, deep in my bones, that I had finally become enough, not just for them, but for me. After the showcase, everything changed, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't that the applause or the recognition from my classmates meant nothing. They were, of course, validating moments, but they weren't what defined the transformation. What mattered most was how I felt when I looked at myself in the mirror every day after. For the first time, I saw someone worthy of the love, attention, and success I had once believed were out of my reach. At school, people no longer looked past me, but it wasn't the attention I craved, it was the respect. Classmates who once ignored me now sought out my opinions. Teachers asked me to lead group discussions, and when I spoke, there was an energy in my voice that others couldn't ignore. I wasn't just present anymore, I was seen. My peers respected me, not because I had tried to change to fit in, but because I had finally embraced who I was, flaws and all. But the true shift was in my relationship with Emily. She had been there through the hardest days, supporting me when I wanted to give up, and together we had navigated the challenges of school and friendship. Now, I could see her in a new light. Her belief in me never wavered, even when I had doubted myself. I realized that my transformation wasn't just about self-discovery, it was also about recognizing the people who had always seen me for who I could be. Emily and I grew even closer as I shared my newfound confidence with her, and together we celebrated the little victories, like when I finally agreed to join the school's art club, something I would have never dared to do before. Outside of school, my family noticed the change too. My parents were proud of the strides I had made, but even more, they saw the light in my eyes that had been absent for so long. There was a shift in the way I interacted with them. I stopped holding myself back from sharing my thoughts and desires, and instead of staying silent during family conversations, I spoke up, adding my voice without hesitation. Looking ahead, I knew the journey wasn't over. The fear didn't completely disappear. It never does. But I had learned to walk through it, to own it. The girl who once feared her reflection had found peace within herself. Now I walked with my head high, and for the first time in my life, I knew I belonged just as I was. The journey of transformation is never easy, but it is always worth it. What I learned through this experience is that the most important change comes from within. True beauty doesn't lie in fitting into someone else's mold, but in embracing who we truly are, flaws and all. The most powerful version of ourselves is the one we allow to shine, without fear or hesitation. When we stop seeking validation from others and start validating ourselves, that's when we become unstoppable. So, remember, the person you are today is enough, and the journey you embark on to discover your true self will lead you to places you never imagined. Embrace your imperfections, trust your growth, and let your authentic self be the light that guides you forward.